Nestled along the winding banks of the Rivertown River, the small town of Rivertown had always prided itself on its picturesque charm. Quaint cobblestone streets, lined with historic oak trees, spoke to a past steeped in resilience and tradition. Yet beneath its postcard-perfect exterior, tensions simmered. Progress had come knocking, and with it, the promise of a gleaming commercial development, threatening to uproot the very heart of the town, the historical Oak Grove. To some, the project symbolized economic growth and opportunity. To others, it was a destructive force, poised to erase Rivertown's identity. As the clash of perspectives intensified, so did the fractures in the community. Friendships strained, families argued, and the usually calm streets buzzed with hushed debates. Amid this turmoil, two figures, Officer Jacob Dawson and Maya Carter, stood at opposite ends of the storm. Jacob, a veteran cop, had spent years patrolling Rivertown streets, his sense of duty calcified by experience. Maya, a spirited 12-year-old with a heart for activism, had no patience for bureaucracy or compromise. Their paths, though vastly different, were on a collision course that neither could foresee. It all began one summer morning, when the first signs of unrest crackled through the town square like an approaching thunderstorm. A protest was brewing, and what started as a peaceful gathering was about to become the flashpoint for change that no one, not Jacob, not Maya, not even Rivertown itself, could ignore. The sun cast a golden glow over Rivertown's Oak Grove as the protesters assembled, their voices rising in unity against the towering specter of change. Handmade signs bobbed in the air, adorned with slogans like "Save Our Heritage" and "No Mall on Sacred Ground." Maya Carter stood among them, her dark curls bouncing as she adjusted her bright green sign. In bold letters it read, "Our Roots, Our Future." She was the youngest in the crowd, but far from the least passionate. "We're doing this for more than just the trees," Maya said, her voice steady despite her age. "It's about respecting the past and protecting our future." Her words earned murmurs of agreement and a reassuring pat on the shoulder from Mrs. Ella Jenkins, the town's retired librarian and a longtime activist. Not far away, Officer Jacob Dawson watched the scene from his patrol car, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. This wasn't his first protest. He had seen his share of confrontations, and they rarely ended without someone crossing the line. His radio crackled, interrupting his thoughts. "Dawson, we need you near the square. Protesters are refusing to disperse. Keep it under control." With a sigh, Jacob grabbed his hat and stepped out of the car. As he approached the crowd, his presence cast a shadow over the demonstrators. Most fell quiet, their gazes wary, but Maya held her ground. "You shouldn't be here," Jacob said, his tone gruff as he addressed the protesters. "This is private property. Disperse now, or we'll have to take action." Maya stepped forward. "This isn't just property. It's our history." Jacob's gaze flickered to the girl, holding the sign almost as big as her. "Kid, go home. This isn't the place for you. And let you destroy what matters most to us." Maya shot back, her voice unwavering. "No way." The tension was palpable as more protesters chimed in, their voices growing louder. "We have the right to protest," one shouted. "Save the Oaks," cried another. Jacob raised his hands in a vain attempt to calm the crowd. "Last warning," he barked. "Clear out or face the consequences." Before he could finish, a scuffle broke out near the front line of protesters. Someone's sign had knocked into another's camera, escalating into a shouting match. Seizing the opportunity to assert control, Jacob moved forward and grabbed the nearest participant, Maya. "You're under arrest for inciting disorder," he said, his grip firm on her arm. "What?" Maya gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. I didn't do anything wrong. Tell it to the judge, Jacob muttered, leading her to his patrol car. Around them, protesters erupted in outrage. She's just a kid, one shouted. You can't do this. Another yelled, pulling out a phone to record the incident. Maya's mother, Leah Carter, arrived just as Jacob closed the car door. Her face turned ashen as she saw her daughter behind the bars of the squad car window. You have no right, Leah said, her voice sharp as a blade. She's 12 years old. She was resisting orders, Jacob replied curtly, avoiding Leah's glare. As the patrol car sped toward the station, the crowd's chants grew louder, their cries of injustice echoing through the grove. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the police station, Maya sat on the bench, her wrists bound by handcuffs too big for her. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she refused to cry. Around her, officers moved with indifference, their chatter and laughter a stark contrast to her quiet resolve. The double doors of the station flew open, slamming against the walls, with a resounding bang. Chief Elliot Carter's imposing frame filled the doorway, his usually composed face twisted in fury. Where is she? He demanded. Jacob stepped forward, his expression neutral. In holding. She was leading the protest. Elliot's eyes narrowed. You arrested my daughter. The room fell silent. Officers stopped in their tracks, exchanging uneasy glances. Jacob's face paled. Your daughter? Yes, Elliot hissed, his voice low but charged. And you'd better have a damn good reason why she's sitting in my station in handcuffs. Jacob stammered, suddenly unsure. She wouldn't disperse. It was a lawful arrest. Elliot's jaw tightened. Uncuff her. Now. Jacob hesitated for a fraction of a second before moving toward the holding area. The weight of his mistake bore down on him with every step. When he returned with Maya, uncuffed and trembling, her father's eyes softened slightly as he embraced her. Are you okay? Elliot asked, his tone gentle. Maya nodded, though her voice wavered. They said I did something wrong, but I didn't, Dad. I was just trying to help. Elliot turned back to Jacob, his voice hard once more. We'll be talking about this later. As Leah arrived at the station to collect Maya, the tension in the air was palpable. The protest had ignited more than just a local dispute. It had become the catalyst for a reckoning, one that would shake the foundations of Rivertown's fragile peace. The air in Rivertown simmered with tension, following the tumultuous events at the Oak Grove protest. As the morning sun illuminated the charming streets of this close-knit town, it became clear that the arrest of 12-year-old Maya Carter had sent ripples far beyond its borders. The video of Maya's arrest, hastily captured on a bystander's phone, was uploaded to social media within hours. By the next morning, it had gone viral. Maya's tear-streaked face, framed by the cruel glint of handcuffs, became a symbol of injustice. The hashtag number Justice for Maya trended nationwide, drawing support from environmental activists, civil rights organizations, and prominent voices who saw her plight as emblematic of systemic problems in law enforcement. On Rivertown's Main Street, protests resumed with renewed fervor. Demonstrators carried signs reading "Protect the Oaks" and "Hands off our kids." The crowd included a wider cross-section of the community this time. Teachers, small business owners, and even members of local clergy joined the activists. Among them was Sarah Monroe, a journalist for the local paper, the Rivertown Gazette. With her notepad in hand and camera slung over her shoulder, Sarah captured the mood of the crowd. This isn't just about the trees anymore, she remarked to her colleague. It's about what's right for the town and holding the powerful accountable. The police department faced an avalanche of public criticism. At the center of it was Officer Jacob Dawson, whose decision to arrest Maya had been caught on video. The footage showed him grabbing her protest sign and leading her away, ignoring her protests of innocence. Anonymous messages flooded the department's social media pages, accusing the officers of brutality and prejudice. The Carter household was a microcosm of the turmoil gripping the town. Maya's mother, Leah Carter, paced the living room, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her furrowed brow as she reviewed footage of the protest. "This is an egregious violation of First Amendment rights," she declared. Leah, a civil rights attorney, had already begun drafting a formal complaint against the police department. She glanced at Maya, who sat curled on the couch, clutching a mug of tea and staring blankly at the news coverage on TV. "I didn't do anything wrong," Maya murmured, her voice tinged with lingering disbelief. "I just wanted to save the trees." Leah softened, sitting beside her daughter and wrapping her arm around her. "I know, sweetheart. What happened to you is unacceptable, but we're going to fight this." Chief Elliot Carter entered the room, his face etched with exhaustion. He had spent the day fielding calls from irate residents, city officials, and even state representatives. "Leah, Maya," he began, his tone somber. "This has escalated far beyond a local incident. The governor's office is involved now. They're demanding answers." Leah's eyes flashed. "Good. Maybe they'll finally take this seriously." Elliot sighed. "But it's also putting a spotlight on our family. I'm the chief of police, and this—" He gestured toward the television, which displayed footage of Maya being led away in cuffs. "Makes it look like I've lost control of my department?" Maya turned to her father, her eyes filled with both defiance and hurt. "You're not going to defend him, are you, Officer Dawson?" Elliot knelt before her, taking her hands. "No, Maya, I'm not. But this is complicated. There are policies, investigations, and—" He faltered, catching Leah's sharp glare. "What's complicated about doing the right thing?" Leah demanded. Meanwhile, Sarah Monroe's investigative instincts had kicked into high gear. She pored over town records, zoning permits, and council meeting minutes, looking for any inconsistencies in the approval process for the commercial development. Her suspicions were confirmed when she stumbled upon a buried report from an independent environmental assessment. The report, dated 2 years prior, indicated the potential presence of indigenous artifacts within the Oak Grove's vicinity. Sarah's heart raced as she read the concluding recommendation. Further archaeological investigation is strongly advised before proceeding with construction. The council, however, had approved the project without addressing the report. Why wasn't this disclosed? Sarah muttered to herself. She dug deeper, discovering a series of unusually large campaign donations made to council members shortly before the vote. Her editor's voice echoed in her mind. Follow the money. Sarah knew she was onto something big. She snapped photos of the documents and drafted a headline. Rivertown Council fast-tracked mall project despite environmental warnings. At the police station, Officer Dawson sat at his desk, flipping through the paperwork from Maya's arrest. The image of her tear-streaked face haunted him. He'd arrested countless people in his career, but this time felt different. Chief Carter entered the room, his presence commanding. Dawson stood, tension radiating from his posture. "Jacob," Carter began. "What were you thinking?" Dawson's jaw tightened. "I was following protocol, sir. The protest was unauthorized and—" "Protocol doesn't excuse bad judgment," Carter snapped. "You arrested a child, my child, and now the entire town is in uproar because of it." For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of phones ringing and officers typing. Dawson's voice softened. "I didn't know she was your daughter, Chief." But that shouldn't matter. She was disrupting public order. Carter's eyes narrowed. She was holding a sign, Dawson. Not committing a crime. You need to take a long, hard look at yourself and how you're enforcing the law. As Carter left, Dawson slumped into his chair, the weight of his actions settling on him. For the first time, he began to question the values that had guided him throughout his career. By the end of the week, tensions in Rivertown had reached a boiling point. Protesters surrounded the oak grove, vowing to protect the land, until the council reconsidered. Police presence remained heavy, but the officers were visibly hesitant to intervene after the fallout from Maya's arrest. Leah's legal complaint gained traction, with the ACLU expressing interest in supporting her case. Sarah Monroe's expose hit the front page, throwing the council into damage control mode. In the shadows, Daniel Vance, the developer behind the project, watched the chaos unfold. He slammed the newspaper onto his desk, the headline staring back at him. Environmental concerns ignored in Rivertown Mall approval. Vance picked up his phone and barked an order. We need this to go away. Find out who's stirring up trouble and shut them down. Unknown to Vance, his actions were about to trigger a chain of events that would unravel secrets, alliances, and the very foundations of Rivertown's power structure. The town of Rivertown was still reeling from the shockwaves of the protest. The oak grove at the center of the dispute now stood as both a battleground and a symbol of resistance. As the days unfolded, the division in the community grew sharper, and new alliances and threats began to take shape. Maya Carter sat cross-legged on the worn carpet of her bedroom, surrounded by hand-drawn posters and a pile of marker pens. Her determination burned brighter than ever. Despite the arrest and the chaos at the protest, she refused to let fear dictate her actions. "Mom," Maya called out as Leah Carter entered the room. "What if we organize another protest? But this time, bigger and completely peaceful?" Leah, a seasoned lawyer, paused, her eyes filled with both pride and concern. "Maya, you're brave. But this fight is getting dangerous. We need to be strategic." Maya nodded, taking her mother's words seriously. That night, she stayed up late, drafting a plan to rally support for the oak grove. She decided to seek guidance from her history teacher, Mr. Harrison, whose passion for local heritage was well known. The next morning, Maya walked into Mr. Harrison's classroom with a notebook full of ideas. "Mr. Harrison," she began, her voice steady, "I need your help. We need to save the grove, and I think the history of this place can be our strongest argument." Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, intrigued. "Did you know those oaks were planted over 150 years ago? They are tied to some of the town's earliest settlers. If we dig deeper, we might find more reasons why that land is significant." Maya smiled, feeling the weight of his support behind her growing mission. Meanwhile, Officer Jacob Dawson sat alone at his kitchen table, his untouched coffee growing cold. The arrest replayed in his mind like a broken record. The image of Maya's tear-streaked face haunted him. He picked up his phone and hesitated before dialing Chief Elliot Carter's number. The chief's voice was terse. "Dawson, this isn't the time for second-guessing. You were wrong to arrest Maya. But there's more at play here than a single mistake. You need to think carefully about where you stand." Hanging up, Jacob felt no closer to clarity. His loyalty to the department was unquestionable, but for the first time, he wondered if loyalty meant complicity. Later that day, Jacob drove past the oak grove. He saw children playing under its canopy and protesters holding hands in silent vigil. Among them was Maya, her handmade sign reading, "This land tells stories. Let it speak." Jacob parked his patrol car a distance away and watched. He could feel the dissonance growing between his role as an enforcer of the law and the undeniable righteousness of their cause. Across town, in a sleek, glass-walled office, Daniel Vance, the wealthy developer behind the project, held a meeting with his legal team. "This little girl and her family are becoming a problem," Vance said, pacing the room. "We need to discredit them, dig into their past, find something, anything that we can use against them." His top lawyer, Jennifer Stokes, shifted uneasily in her chair. "Sir, targeting a child and her family could backfire. Public opinion is already against us." "Then deal with it subtly," Vance snapped. "I don't care how you do it. Just ensure this development moves forward." As the meeting adjourned, Vance pulled aside a security consultant. "And increase surveillance around the grove. Let's make sure we know every move they make." That evening, as Leah reviewed legal documents in her home office, she noticed an unfamiliar black car parked across the street. When she stepped outside to investigate, the car sped away. Leah returned inside, her chest tight with unease. She knew the stakes were rising. A few days later, Maya found a note slipped into her locker at school. It read, "Stay out of this if you know what's good for you." Her hands trembled as she showed it to her mother that evening. Leah immediately reported the incident to Chief Carter. "This isn't just about the grove anymore," Leah said. "This is about intimidation and abuse of power." Chief Carter promised to investigate, but even he knew the forces opposing them were powerful and well-connected. At a town council meeting, tensions reached a boiling point. Protesters filled the chamber, holding signs and chanting slogans. Daniel Vance and his team presented a polished case for why the development would revitalize the town. Leah Carter stood up to counter, armed with evidence of corruption in the land deal. But the council seemed unmoved. As the meeting dragged on, Maya stood to speak. Her small frame and youthful voice drew immediate attention. "This isn't just about trees," Maya said, her voice steady despite the pressure. "This is about protecting what makes our town special. These oaks are part of our history. We can't trade them for a mall that no one asked for." The room erupted into applause, but not everyone was pleased. Vance's expression darkened, and he whispered to one of his associates, "We'll deal with them." Quietly, later that night, Jacob received an anonymous message on his personal phone, a warning to stay out of the fight if he valued his career. He stared at the text, a knot forming in his stomach. At the same time, Maya sat at her desk, writing a letter to local newspapers about the protest. Her determination was undimmed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The chapter ended with two starkly different scenes: Jacob, torn between duty and morality, and Maya, steadfast in her fight. The growing threat from Vance's camp loomed over both, setting the stage for the next chapter. The divide in Rivertown widened as tensions simmered beneath its otherwise serene facade. Maya's growing movement inspired both solidarity and hostility, while Jacob wrestled with the weight of his conscience. Meanwhile, Leah Carter and Sarah Monroe pursued a dangerous path, uncovering secrets that could shift the balance of power in the battle for the Oak Grove. The sharp tap of Leah's heels echoed in the quiet hallway of Rivertown's municipal building. She and investigative journalist Sarah Monroe had obtained access to the town council's public records under the guise of filing for an unrelated environmental review. What they uncovered painted a grim picture of backroom deals and shadowy transactions. "Here," Sarah whispered, spreading a set of documents across the small table in the archive room. "Look at these approvals for the land development project. They are dated weeks before the public hearing." Leah frowned, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. "And these payments," she said, pointing to a column of bank transfers. They align perfectly with the dates of key council votes. This isn't just unethical, it's illegal. They photocopied the incriminating evidence, knowing full well the risks of what they were about to expose. As they left the building, Sarah turned to Leah. If we're right, this isn't just a case of corporate greed. This could be one of the biggest corruption scandals Rivertown has ever seen. As the protest movement grew, so did the resistance against it. Maya organized a community gathering at the town's library to educate residents on the significance of the oak grove. Elderly citizens shared memories of playing under the trees as children, while environmentalists presented data on the ecosystem's fragile balance. Jacob Dawson, though still torn, attended the meeting in plain clothes. He stood at the back, observing Maya as she confidently led discussions and rallied support. Her poise reminded him of someone he had once been, a younger, idealistic version of himself before cynicism took root. Yet the gathering wasn't without its challenges. Near the end of the meeting, a group of men in construction uniforms stormed in, their demeanor aggressive. "You're wasting your time," one of them sneered. "This project's happening whether you like it or not." Maya stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "We have a right to be heard. If you're so confident, why are you trying to intimidate us?" Jacob moved instinctively, placing himself between Maya and the men. "That's enough," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. The men backed down, but their smirks hinted that the fight was far from over. Later that evening, Maya approached Jacob outside the library. The street lamps cast long shadows across the pavement as she spoke. "You didn't have to help back there," she said, her tone cautious. Jacob looked down, his expression conflicted. "I was doing my job, keeping the peace." "You're not in uniform," Maya pointed out, her sharpness cutting through his defenses. "You're here because you know this is wrong." Jacob sighed. "It's not that simple. I can't just turn against my department or the people I've worked with for years." "Sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone," Maya replied, her words carrying more conviction than her years might suggest. She handed him a flyer for the next protest. "If you're really about keeping the peace, then help us. Protect us." Jacob didn't respond, but he pocketed the flyer before walking away. At home, Maya and her family faced increasing threats. Anonymous phone calls interrupted their evenings, and cryptic messages appeared in their mailbox. One morning, Maya found graffiti sprayed across their front gate. "Stop or else." Leah's jaw tightened as she scrubbed at the graffiti with a brush. "This is Daniel Vance," she muttered. "He's trying to scare us into backing down." But Maya refused to be silenced. Instead, she channeled her fear into action, organizing a vigil at the Oak Grove. She reached out to Elder Thomas Greyhawk, a respected member of the local indigenous community, for support. "The trees are more than just landmarks," Elder Greyhawk explained to the gathered crowd that evening. "They're a part of our story. Disturbing this land dishonors those who came before us." His words resonated deeply, strengthening the resolve of everyone present. The vigil concluded with a candlelit walk through the grove, their flickering lights illuminating the towering trees. Meanwhile, Leah and Sarah's investigation bore fruit. Among the documents they had uncovered was a map indicating that the proposed development site might contain indigenous artifacts, a finding that could halt construction indefinitely. Leah brought the evidence to Chief Carter's office, laying the papers across his desk. "This isn't just about corruption," she said. "If we can prove the presence of artifacts, the land will be federally protected." Chief Carter studied the documents carefully. "This could be a game changer," he admitted. "But going public with this will put a target on your back." "We're already targets," Leah replied. But we won't stop. The next day, Leah called a press conference at the town square. Standing beside her was Elder Greyhawk, who spoke passionately about the cultural significance of the land. We must honor our ancestors and protect this sacred place, he declared. This grove isn't just part of Rivertown's history. It's part of our collective soul. The press conference drew widespread attention, but it also provoked a swift response from Daniel Vance. Within hours, his legal team filed an injunction against the protesters, claiming they were obstructing lawful business operations. Jacob watched the news coverage from his living room, the flyer Maya had given him still on his kitchen counter. He knew he couldn't stay on the sidelines much longer. That night, Maya gathered with her closest friends to strategize their next move. They decided to launch a community fundraiser to bring in experts who could validate the presence of artifacts on the site. As the group dispersed, Maya lingered under the grove's canopy, the ancient trees standing sentinel in the moonlight. Jacob approached quietly, his steps hesitant. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice low. "Maybe it's time I stopped making excuses." Maya looked up at him, her expression a mix of surprise and hope. "Does that mean you'll help us?" Jacob nodded. "I'll help. But we need to be smart about this. They're playing dirty, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Together, they began to plan their next steps, an unlikely alliance forming between the seasoned officer and the young activist. The stakes were higher than ever, but for the first time, Jacob felt like he was on the right side of the fight. The town of Rivertown woke to a cloudy morning, the sky draped in shades of gray that mirrored the tension simmering below. The oak grove stood silent, its ancient trees looming over the contested ground, as if they were guardians waiting for justice. Maya and her allies were hard at work, determined to protect what they had fought so hard to preserve. It began with a faint metallic clink. A construction worker operating a backhoe at the edge of the development site stopped abruptly, his machine having struck something solid, yet delicate. Cursing under his breath, he climbed down to investigate, only to find what appeared to be fragments of pottery, etched with intricate designs. Word spread quickly. By the end of the day, archaeologists from the State University had arrived, their team led by the meticulous and sharp-witted Dr. Clara Thompson. Within hours, they confirmed the presence of artifacts that could date back centuries. The site was declared off-limits and work ground to a halt. At the Oak Grove, Maya and her friends gathered excitedly, passing around a copy of the local newspaper with the headline, "Archaeological Find Could Halt Rivertown Mall Project." Maya's eyes sparkled with determination. "This is it," she said. "This is the proof we need." Dr. Thompson, accompanied by Elder Thomas Greyhawk, addressed the press at the site. "These findings are significant," Dr. Thompson explained, holding up a shard of pottery. "They indicate the presence of an indigenous settlement. This land is more than a construction site. It's a part of history." Elder Greyhawk added, "This discovery reaffirms what we've been saying all along. This grove is sacred ground." The announcement sent shockwaves through Rivertown. While environmentalists and community members celebrated, Daniel Vance's team moved swiftly. The developer held an emergency meeting, his frustration palpable as he barked orders at his legal team. "We can't let this derail us," Vance growled, slamming his fist on the table. "Discredit the findings, discredit the experts, whatever it takes." The tactics began almost immediately. News articles surfaced questioning Dr. Thompson's credentials, and protesters reported being followed or harassed. Leah Carter received a cryptic voicemail. "Back off, or you'll regret it." Jacob Dawson found himself on edge as he noticed an unmarked car parked near his house late one night. He knew the implications. "They're watching us," he told Maya during a clandestine meeting at the library. "But why would they come after you?" Maya asked, concern etched across her face. Jacob hesitated. "Because I've been digging into the department's records, and I found something that connects Vance to members of the town council. If I expose this, they'll come for all of us." Jacob couldn't stay silent any longer. Gathering his evidence, a series of emails and financial records, linking Vance to bribes paid to key officials, he met with Sarah Monroe. "This is everything I have," he told her, sliding a manila folder across the table. "It's enough to prove corruption, but it's going to paint a target on my back." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "You're doing the right thing. We'll make sure this story gets out." Within days, the revelations were published in a scathing expose. The article detailed how Vance had funneled money through shell companies to secure favorable votes from the town council. Public outrage exploded, and protesters rallied at the town square, chanting for justice. In the midst of the chaos, Maya proposed a bold idea: a community event to celebrate the Oak Grove and raise awareness about its significance. Flyers were distributed, and the event quickly gained momentum. On the evening of the gathering, the Oak Grove was transformed into a lively celebration. Fairy lights hung from branches, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Musicians played acoustic sets, while local artists displayed paintings inspired by the grove. Maya stood on a makeshift stage, addressing the crowd. "This grove is more than just trees," she said, her voice carrying through the night. "It's a symbol of everything we stand for: our history, our community, and our future. Together, we can protect it." The applause was thunderous. Even Jacob, standing at the edge of the crowd, couldn't help but feel a swell of hope. But the night wasn't without its dangers. As the event wound down, Maya noticed two men lingering near the grove's edge. Their faces were unfamiliar, their demeanor tense. She approached cautiously, her friends trailing behind her. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone firm. One of the men smirked, just admiring the view. Maya's instincts told her something was wrong. "This is private property. If you're not here for the event, you need to leave." The men exchanged glances before walking away, but not without a parting comment. "You should be careful, kid. This grove isn't worth losing everything." Shaken but undeterred, Maya reported the incident to Jacob, who promised to look into it. "Stay vigilant," he warned. "This fight is far from over." As tensions reached a boiling point, the stakes grew higher. Dr. Thompson's team uncovered more artifacts, including tools and carvings that hinted at a rich cultural history. The findings drew national attention, and cameras descended on Rivertown. Maya, Leah, and Elder Greyhawk became the faces of the movement, appearing in interviews and calling for the grove's protection. Meanwhile, Jacob worked behind the scenes, gathering more evidence and ensuring the safety of the protesters. During a particularly heated town council meeting, Vance made a desperate plea to proceed with the project, dismissing the artifacts as insignificant. But Maya, armed with facts and unwavering resolve, delivered a powerful rebuttal. "These artifacts tell the story of a people who were here long before any of us," she said. "To destroy this site is to erase their history and dishonor their legacy. We can't let greed win." The room erupted in applause, leaving Vance visibly flustered. The chapter culminates in a dramatic confrontation at the Oak Grove. Late one night, workers hired by Vance attempt to clear the site, but they are stopped by a group of protesters led by Maya and Jacob. A tense standoff ensues as police arrive, their loyalties divided. Chief Carter steps forward, his voice commanding. This ends now. No more intimidation, no more destruction. We're protecting this land, and we're doing it the right way. With the police and protesters united, the workers retreat, marking a pivotal victory for the movement. The air over Rivertown grew heavy, thick with tension, and an undercurrent of something darker. As construction on the Oak Grove site remained stalled, rumors of strange occurrences began to swirl. What had started as whispered speculation quickly morphed into a narrative that consumed the town. Whispers of a curse tied to the land echoed in hushed conversations, but no one could have predicted just how deeply fear would take root. It began with small, easily dismissible incidents. Construction workers reported their tools vanishing, only to reappear in strange locations. One morning, a foreman arrived to find the heavy machinery coated in a layer of fine, powdery dirt, despite being cleaned the night before. Then, the sightings began. "Did you see that?" asked Mike, one of the night guards, his voice shaking, as he shined his flashlight into the darkness. "I swear, something just moved by the tree line." His partner chuckled nervously. "It's probably a deer." Mike shook his head. It wasn't an animal. It was taller. Within days, more workers refused to return to the site. Some claimed to hear voices whispering their names in the wind, while others described the sensation of unseen eyes watching them. A few packed up and left town entirely, their belongings hastily thrown into the backs of pickup trucks. Elder Thomas Greyhawk, accompanied by other members of the local indigenous community, held a press conference to address the growing unease. "This land carries deep spiritual significance," he said solemnly. "Disturbing it without reverence has consequences. These occurrences are not random. They are a warning." The media ate it up. Headlines blared, "Curse of the Oak Grove," and "Supernatural Forces Haunt Rivertown Project." Despite the warnings, Daniel Vance remained undeterred. "This is nonsense," he scoffed during an emergency board meeting. "We're not stopping because of fairy tales." But Rivertown had other plans. One fateful night, the town was awoken by the unrelenting howl of sirens. Flames shot into the sky from the heart of the project's headquarters, a sleek modern building that once symbolized Vance's vision for Rivertown's future. Now, it was engulfed in an inferno that seemed to burn with a fury unmatched by any ordinary fire. Jacob Dawson, watching from the safety of his patrol car, felt a chill run down his spine. The firefighters battled the blaze for hours, but their efforts were futile. By dawn, the building was nothing more than a smoldering skeleton. The cause of the fire remained unknown, though whispers of supernatural intervention spread faster than the flames had. Maya watched the news coverage from her living room, her hands clenched into fists. "This isn't how we wanted to win," she said quietly. Her mother, Leah, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "This was never just about the Grove, Maya. It's about what the Grove represents and what happens when people ignore the importance of balance and respect." As the town reeled from the fire, a town hall meeting was called to address the escalating crisis. The room was packed, filled with angry residents, frightened workers, and media eager for a dramatic soundbite. Maya stepped forward, her small frame dwarfed by the podium. Yet, when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone far beyond her years. "We're not fighting against progress," she began. "We're fighting for respect, for our history, our environment, and our community." She gestured to the crowd, her gaze steady. "Look around you. This isn't just about a shopping mall or a few trees. It's about standing up to greed and corruption, about honoring the people who came before us and protecting what they left behind." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Even Daniel Vance, seated in the back, with his arms crossed, couldn't entirely mask his discomfort. This grove has been here longer than any of us, Maya continued. If we let it be destroyed, we lose more than just trees. We lose a piece of ourselves. The crowd erupted into applause, her words resonating far beyond the walls of the town hall. Maya's speech galvanized the town, but it also painted a target on her back. The following night, the Carter family woke to the sound of shattering glass. Someone had thrown a brick through their living room window, a crude note attached that read, "Stay out of it." Jacob arrived within minutes, his jaw tightening as he surveyed the damage. "This is more than intimidation," he told Chief Carter. "They're trying to scare her into silence." But Maya refused to back down. "They can break our windows," she said fiercely, "but they can't break our resolve." Her words inspired others. Protesters returned to the grove in droves, their signs proclaiming solidarity. "Save the grove! Save our town!" The chants echoed through Rivertown, a rallying cry for justice that no one could ignore. As the movement gained momentum, Jacob found himself at a crossroads. He had spent years enforcing the law, but now he saw the cracks in the system he once believed in. The more he worked with Maya and her family, the more he realized how much needed to change. One evening, as the sun set over the grove, Jacob joined Maya and Leah around a small fire. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "When I first arrested you, Maya, I thought I was doing my job. But I see now that I was part of the problem." Maya looked at him, her eyes softening. "You can be part of the solution too." Jacob nodded. "I'm ready, whatever it takes." Together they began strategizing, their unlikely alliance marking a turning point in the fight to save the grove. The chapter concludes with a dramatic showdown at the Oak Grove. A shadowy figure is caught sneaking into the site late at night, a canister of gasoline in hand. Maya, who had been keeping watch with a group of protesters, confronts him. "Stop right there," she shouts, her voice echoing through the grove. The man freezes, the canister slipping from his grasp. Moments later, Jacob and Chief Carter arrive, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "This ends now," Chief Carter declares, his voice firm. "You're under arrest." As the man is led away in handcuffs, the protesters cheer, their victory hard-won, but deeply satisfying. For the first time in weeks, Maya feels a glimmer of hope. The remnants of fear and chaos from the curse began to fade, but the echoes of what transpired continued to ripple through Rivertown. Amid the dust and shadows left by the destruction, a new sense of purpose began to rise. Redemption would not come easily, but for Officer Jacob Dawson, it was a path he was finally ready to walk. The morning sun illuminated Rivertown's central square as residents gathered for an impromptu press conference. Jacob Dawson stood at the podium, his uniform freshly pressed, but his face bore the lines of recent reflection and sleepless nights. The whispers of the crowd hushed as he adjusted the microphone. "I owe this town an apology," Jacob began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Several months ago, I made a grave mistake when I arrested Maya Carter. That mistake wasn't just an error in judgment. It was a failure to uphold the values I swore to protect." Maya stood off to the side, her arms crossed, but her expression softening as she listened. The crowd murmured, their initial skepticism gradually giving way to curiosity. "I've spent weeks reflecting on my actions," Jacob continued. "I realized that my role as a police officer isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about building trust, about protecting everyone in this community, not just those who look like me or agree with me. And it's about having the courage to admit when you've been wrong." The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment, the square was silent. Then, a single pair of hands began to clap. Slowly, others joined in, until the applause swelled, filling the square with a cautious but hopeful energy. Later that day, Jacob visited the Carter home for the first time since the incident. Leah answered the door, her expression a mix of surprise and wariness. "I'm not here as an officer," Jacob said quickly. "I'm here to ask for your help." Leah hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. They sat in the living room, where the shattered window had recently been replaced, the faint smell of fresh paint lingering in the air. "I want to take a stand against what's happening in this town," Jacob said. "The corruption, the intimidation. It's not right. But I can't do it alone." Leah studied him for a moment before nodding. "If you're serious, we'll help. But this isn't just about fixing your mistakes, Jacob. It's about making real change." Together with Chief Carter and Elder Thomas Greyhawk, they devised a plan to challenge the development in court. Leah would lead the legal charge, using the evidence she and journalist Sarah Monroe had uncovered. Elder Greyhawk would rally the indigenous community to bring cultural significance to the forefront. Jacob would act as a whistleblower, exposing the corruption within the police department and the town council. The courtroom was packed when the case against the development reached its first hearing. Reporters jostled for position, their cameras capturing every tense moment as Leah presented the damning evidence. "This isn't just a case of environmental negligence," Leah said, her voice ringing clear. "This is a case of greed, of deception, and of blatant disregard for the law." Daniel Vance sat at the defense table, his face a mask of carefully controlled fury. He glanced toward Jacob, who sat beside Leah, ready to testify. The moment the prosecution called Jacob to the stand, the room collectively held its breath. Jacob took a deep breath as he faced the court. "I've worked in this town for over a decade," he began. "In that time, I've seen good people silenced and bad decisions pushed through because of power and influence. Today, I'm here to make things right." His testimony detailed the bribes, the intimidation tactics, and the systemic failure that had allowed the development to proceed unchecked. He didn't spare himself in the recounting, openly admitting his complicity and expressing his regret. When Jacob finished, there was no applause, but the solemn nods from the jury and the murmurs among the audience spoke volumes. The court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, issuing an immediate cease and desist order on the development. But the consequences for Daniel Vance didn't stop there. A subsequent investigation revealed further ethical violations, leading to his arrest. Rivertown watched as the man who once sought to reshape their community left in handcuffs, his empire in ruins. After the trial, Jacob approached Maya as she stood by the oak grove, her hand resting on one of the ancient trees. The site, now quiet and undisturbed, seemed to breathe with relief. "Maya," Jacob began hesitantly, "I want to thank you. You didn't have to give me a second chance, but you did, and it made all the difference." Maya turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "You stood up when it mattered," she said simply. "That's what counts." They shared a small, understanding smile, the kind that signaled a bridge had been built, however fragile. The victory in Rivertown quickly gained national attention. Environmental groups and civil rights organizations highlighted the town's fight as a blueprint for grassroots activism. Maya received invitations to speak at events in neighboring towns, sharing her story and encouraging others to stand up for their communities. "This isn't just about Rivertown," Maya told a crowd in a nearby city. "It's about what happens when people come together to demand change. No one is too small to make a difference." Jacob, too, found himself in the spotlight. His transformation from a jaded officer to a community advocate became a symbol of redemption and the possibility of change Within law enforcement, back in Rivertown, the community began the slow process of healing. The Oak Grove stood as a testament to what they had accomplished together, a symbol of resilience and the power of collective action. Jacob initiated a community policing program, aiming to rebuild trust and ensure accountability. Maya became a youth leader, mentoring other young activists and working on projects that combined education and environmental preservation. One evening, as the sun set over the grove, Maya and Jacob stood side by side, watching the light filter through the trees. "We did it," Maya said softly. Jacob nodded. "We did." But they both knew the work wasn't finished. The Oak Grove was safe, but the fight for justice and equality was ongoing. And in Rivertown, a town once divided, hope had taken root. The winds of change swept across Rivertown, carrying with them a cautious optimism. The courtroom victory, while monumental, was not the end of the journey. The town had been fractured, relationships strained, trust eroded, and its identity called into question. Now, it was time to heal. The first step toward healing was conversation. Rivertown's mayor, under the advice of Chief Carter, organized a series of community forums, held in the high school gymnasium. These gatherings were meant to give everyone a chance to voice their concerns, share their hopes, and ask difficult questions. The first forum was tense. Residents packed the bleachers, their faces reflecting a mix of frustration, exhaustion, and guarded hope. Jacob Dawson stood at the front, flanked by Chief Carter and Leah, ready to face the community head-on. "I know many of you have lost faith in us," Jacob began, his voice steady. "And I don't blame you. But I'm here today to listen, to learn, and to take action." Hands shot up immediately. Questions ranged from policing practices to the town council's corruption. Some residents vented their anger, while others expressed a cautious willingness to move forward. Leah moderated the discussion, ensuring everyone had a chance to speak. One moment stood out above the rest. An elderly man named Mr. Simmons, who had lived in Rivertown his entire life, stood and addressed the room. "I've seen this town go through a lot," he said, his voice gravelly but firm. "We've made mistakes, but we've also shown we can come together when it counts. Don't let this moment slip away. Let's make it count for something." His words set the tone for the subsequent forums, where anger began to give way to collaboration. Ideas were proposed, committees were formed, and slowly but surely, a path forward began to take shape. As part of his commitment to rebuilding trust, Jacob spearheaded a new community policing initiative. He met with residents, teachers, and local leaders to understand their needs and concerns. The goal was to create a department that truly served the people, a vision he once believed was impossible. The program included mandatory training on bias awareness and conflict de-escalation, a direct response to the mistakes Jacob had made during Maya's arrest. Officers were encouraged to engage with the community outside of enforcement, attending events and volunteering at local schools. At first, the reception was lukewarm. Many residents, particularly those from marginalized communities, were skeptical, but Jacob didn't waver. He participated in every training session alongside his colleagues, showing that change started at the top. One day, during a community cleanup event organized by Maya, Jacob found himself planting flowers alongside a group of teens. One of them, a boy named Andre, looked at him with a mix of curiosity and distrust. "You're the cop who arrested Maya, right?" Andre asked bluntly. Jacob paused, meeting the boy's gaze. "I am, and I was wrong to do that." Andre's brow furrowed. "Why are you here now?" "Because I want to make things right," Jacob replied. "I know it'll take time, but I'm not going anywhere." The boy nodded slowly, his expression softening. Okay, we'll see. Moments like these became Jacob's measure of progress, not grand gestures, but small steps toward rebuilding trust. While Jacob worked on reforming the police department, Maya focused on turning the contested land into something meaningful. Inspired by the unity and determination she had witnessed during the protests, she proposed the creation of a heritage park. Maya presented her vision to the town council during a public meeting. Her speech, though rehearsed, carried the earnest passion that had become her trademark. "This land isn't just dirt and trees," she said, gesturing to the sketches she had prepared. "It's history, it's community, and it's a chance for us to show the world that Rivertown values more than profit." The plan included walking trails, educational exhibits about the indigenous artifacts discovered on the site, and a cultural center to celebrate the town's diverse heritage. Maya also proposed a youth program to teach environmental stewardship and activism. Elder Thomas Greyhawk stood and spoke after her, lending his support and emphasizing the importance of preserving the site's cultural significance. His presence carried weight, and his words moved even the most skeptical council members. The council voted unanimously to approve the project, and the room erupted in applause. Maya's eyes shone with a mixture of relief and determination as she hugged her parents and Elder Greyhawk. The following months were a flurry of activity as plans for the park took shape. Architects, environmentalists, historians, and community members came together to design a space that honored the past while embracing the future. Maya worked closely with Elder Greyhawk and his team to ensure the indigenous history was accurately represented. They chose locations for interpretive signs and designed a sacred area around the restored stone circle, where visitors could reflect on the site's significance. Meanwhile, local artists contributed their talents, creating murals and sculptures that told the story of Rivertown's journey. One mural depicted the protests, with Maya standing at the forefront, her sign raised high. Another showed the oak grove, its roots intertwining with the indigenous artifacts beneath it. The project also incorporated sustainable practices, such as solar-powered lighting and rainwater harvesting systems. Leah, with her legal expertise, secured additional funding from state and national grants, ensuring the park would remain accessible and well-maintained for generations to come. The groundbreaking ceremony for the park was a moment of triumph. Residents gathered at the site, their faces reflecting pride and hope. Maya stood at the podium, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "This park represents more than just preserved land," she said. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together. It's a reminder that our voices matter and that our actions, no matter how small, can create lasting change." Jacob spoke next, sharing his journey of redemption and the lessons he had learned. When he finished, the crowd gave him a standing ovation, a moment he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As the first shovels broke ground, a sense of unity settled over Rivertown. The divisions that had once seemed insurmountable now felt like cracks in a foundation being rebuilt stronger than before. Over the next year, the park began to take form. Walking trails wound through the oak grove, interpretive signs dotted the landscape, and the cultural center rose at the heart of the site. The community rallied around the project, volunteering their time and resources to bring it to life. For Maya, the park was more than a project. It was a legacy. She spent hours mentoring younger activists, teaching them how to organize, advocate, and collaborate. Her vision extended beyond Rivertown, inspiring other towns to protect their own histories and environments. Jacob, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. His community policing program flourished, and he became a mentor to new officers, sharing the lessons he had learned the hard way. Rivertown was far from perfect, but it was on a path of progress. The park, once a battleground for conflicting interests, had become a beacon of hope, a testament to what could be achieved when a community chose unity over division. The town of Rivertown buzzed with activity, a palpable energy coursing through its streets. The community had come a long way, but the real challenge was ensuring the unity they had forged would last. The transformation of the contested land into a heritage park symbolized progress, yet the work of collaboration had only just begun. On a brisk morning in early spring, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Rivertown Heritage Park unfolded under a clear blue sky. The crowd gathered around the oak grove, their faces lit with hope. Children waved small flags, decorated with images of the ancient trees and indigenous symbols, while local musicians played a lively tune. Maya Carter stood at the forefront of the gathering, flanked by Elder Thomas Greyhawk and Officer Jacob Dawson. Her father, Chief Elliot Carter, and her mother, Leah, watched proudly from the front row. Maya clutched the ceremonial shovel, its polished handle gleaming in the sunlight. She took a deep breath, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. As the town's mayor introduced Maya, the crowd erupted into applause. Maya stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "This day is not just about building a park," she began. "It's about rebuilding trust, honoring history, and protecting our future. This land tells a story, one of resilience, courage, and community." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Today we break ground not just on a project, but on a promise, to respect our past and nurture the generations to come." When Maya planted the shovel into the earth, the crowd cheered. One by one, other community leaders joined her, each adding their effort to the symbolic first dig. The ceremony marked the beginning of a new chapter for Rivertown. After the ceremony, Jacob Dawson lingered near the oak grove, his thoughts heavy. The cheers and applause were a stark contrast to the anger and distrust he had faced months earlier. Though the community had started to accept his efforts, he knew there were still bridges to rebuild. As he walked toward a group of volunteers, he spotted Andre, the teen who had once questioned his sincerity, handing out water bottles. Andre met Jacob's gaze and nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Later that week, Jacob organized a community roundtable to discuss ongoing improvements in the police department. Held at the newly renovated community center, the meeting drew a diverse group of residents. Jacob stood at the front, sharing updates on bias training and community policing initiatives. "Actions speak louder than words," Jacob said, his tone earnest. "We're here to listen and to learn from you." One resident, Mrs. Alvarez, raised her hand. "I appreciate the changes, Officer Dawson, but trust isn't rebuilt overnight. How do we know these initiatives will last?" Jacob nodded. "That's a fair question. Accountability is key. We've established oversight committees to ensure these reforms are maintained. But I also want to hear from you. What else can we do to earn your trust?" The discussion that followed was candid and constructive. Residents shared their concerns, and Jacob took detailed notes, vowing to address each point. By the end of the evening, the room felt lighter, a tentative but growing sense of partnership taking root. Maya's role as a leader in Rivertown continued to evolve. With the park project underway, she focused on engaging the town's youth. She founded the Rivertown Green Youth Initiative, a group dedicated to environmental education and activism. Their first project involved designing educational displays for the Heritage Park. Maya led brainstorming sessions, encouraging her peers to think creatively about how to tell the land's story. At one meeting, Sarah and Tommy, two of Maya's youngest recruits, proposed an interactive timeline that combined digital screens with physical artifacts. "It'll be like walking through history," Sarah explained, her eyes shining with excitement. Maya beamed. "I love it. Let's make it happen." The youth group also organized tree planting events, community cleanups, and workshops on sustainable living. Under Maya's guidance, the initiative gained momentum, attracting media attention and securing additional funding for their projects. As construction on the park progressed, collaboration between different groups flourished. Architects, environmentalists, indigenous leaders, and local artists worked together, blending modern innovation with cultural preservation. Elder Greyhawk played a crucial role, sharing stories and traditions that shaped the park's design. He worked closely with Dr. Elena Foster, an archaeologist specializing in indigenous history, to ensure the site's artifacts were displayed respectfully. One afternoon, Maya joined Elder Greyhawk and Dr. Foster near the stone circle. They discussed plans for an interpretive exhibit that would highlight the site's significance. "These stones hold more than history," Elder Greyhawk said, his voice low but firm. "They hold lessons. People must understand their value." Maya nodded, taking notes. "We'll make sure every visitor leaves knowing how important this place is." As word of Rivertown's efforts spread, other communities took notice. Environmental organizations, historical societies, and even government agencies reached out, seeking advice on creating similar initiatives. Rivertown became a beacon of hope, a testament to what could be achieved through unity and determination. Jacob and Maya were invited to speak at a statewide conference on community-led conservation. Standing side by side on the stage, they shared Rivertown's journey, the mistakes, the challenges, and the victories. "None of this would have been possible without collaboration," Maya said. "It took all of us working together to turn conflict into progress." Jacob added, "It's not about erasing the past. It's about learning from it. That's what makes true change possible." The audience gave them a standing ovation, inspired by their story of redemption and resilience. Back in Rivertown, the town council passed new laws to protect historical sites and promote sustainable development. The Heritage Park became a symbol of the town's transformation, drawing visitors from near and far. Maya's vision extended beyond the park. She worked with Elder Greyhawk to develop educational programs for local schools, ensuring future generations would continue to honor and protect the land. Meanwhile, Jacob's community policing program expanded, fostering trust and understanding between the police department and residents. The once divided town now stood as a united front, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the park neared completion, Maya reflected on how far they had come. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Rivertown was no longer defined by its divisions, but by its ability to overcome them. Standing at the edge of the oak grove, Maya smiled, knowing their work would leave a lasting legacy, a legacy of collaboration, respect, and hope. The day Rivertown had been eagerly anticipating had finally arrived. The grand opening of the Rivertown Heritage Park. The air was electric with excitement as residents poured into the park, their faces alight with pride and curiosity. Vibrant banners hung along the walkways, bearing messages like, "Preserve our past, protect our future," and "Unity through heritage." Maya Carter stood near the entrance, her heart swelling as she watched families stream into the park. Children darted toward the newly installed playground, their laughter mingling with the cheerful notes of a local band performing under a canopy of restored oak trees. Elder Thomas Greyhawk and his community members were preparing for the opening ceremony, their traditional attire adding a touch of solemnity to the festive atmosphere. Maya's parents, Chief Elliot Carter and Leah Carter, arrived early to help. "You've done something incredible here, Maya," her mother said, squeezing her shoulder. "This park is a testament to everything you've fought for." Maya smiled, a mix of pride and nerves dancing in her chest. "It's not just me, Mom. It's everyone." At the heart of the park, the restored stone circle stood as a centerpiece, surrounded by informational plaques and interpretive displays. Visitors gathered around, marveling at the intricate carvings and the cultural significance of the artifacts. As the ceremony began, the mayor took the stage, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Today, we celebrate not just a park, but a movement. Rivertown has shown what can happen when a community comes together to protect its history, its environment, and its future." She invited Elder Greyhawk to perform a blessing, his deep, resonant voice invoking respect and reflection. As he spoke, the crowd fell silent, the weight of his words grounding everyone in the moment. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she stepped onto the stage, her hands steady as she adjusted the microphone. "This park represents so much more than just a piece of land," she began. "It represents resilience, collaboration, and the belief that our voices, no matter how young or small, can make a difference." The audience erupted into applause as Maya finished, her cheeks flushing with gratitude. She looked out at the sea of faces, feeling the strength of their shared commitment. As the celebration continued, visitors explored the park's features. The walking trails wound through preserved woodlands, dotted with signs detailing the area's history and ecology. Interactive exhibits in the cultural center allowed children to learn about the indigenous artifacts discovered during the excavation. In one corner of the park, a group of teenagers gathered around a digital display that recreated the ancient stone circle in virtual reality. "This is so cool," one of them exclaimed, spinning the holographic images with a swipe of his hand. Meanwhile, a guided tour led by Dr. Elena Foster attracted history enthusiasts who hung on her every word as she described the significance of the site's archaeological finds. "This land holds stories that go back centuries," she explained. "And thanks to all of you, those stories will continue to be told." Elder Greyhawk and his community hosted a workshop on traditional crafts, teaching visitors how to weave baskets and carve wooden tools. Nearby, local artists displayed paintings and sculptures inspired by the park's transformation. Maya watched from a distance, her heart full, as she saw how the park had brought people together. Her youth group members handed out brochures and led activities, their enthusiasm infectious. It was everything she had hoped for, and more. As the sun began to set, the celebration shifted to the main stage for a final round of speeches and awards. The mayor called Officer Jacob Dawson to the stage, his transformation from skeptic to ally, earning him the community's respect. "Officer Dawson," she said, "your journey reminds us that change is possible, even when it's difficult. Your dedication to this community has not gone unnoticed." Jacob accepted the award with a humble smile, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "This park isn't just a place. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we listen to each other. I'm proud to have been part of this journey, and I'm committed to continuing the work we've started." The applause was thunderous, and Jacob glanced at Maya, who gave him an encouraging thumbs up. The recognition felt surreal, but it was a moment he would carry with him forever. Next, Leah Carter took the stage to announce a new initiative, a legal fund dedicated to supporting environmental and civil rights causes across the region. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Together, we can ensure that what happened here in Rivertown serves as a model for other communities." Maya's own efforts were also celebrated. The mayor presented her with a scholarship for her activism, and several universities expressed interest in her future studies. Maya's cheeks burned with pride as the crowd cheered her name. As the festivities wound down, Maya found herself standing by the reflective pool near the stone circle. The water mirrored the soft glow of lanterns strung through the trees, creating a tranquil scene. She pulled out her journal, jotting down her thoughts on the day. "This park is more than I ever imagined," she wrote. "It's a place where people can connect with the past, with nature, and with each other. I hope it inspires everyone who visits to think about what they can do to make the world better." Jacob joined her, his expression thoughtful as he gazed at the stones. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "I never thought I'd see the day when this town felt whole again. You made that happen, Maya." She smiled, closing her journal. "We all did." The two stood in companionable silence, watching as families began to filter out of the park, their laughter echoing through the trees. The future felt bright, full of promise and possibility. The grand opening of the Rivertown Heritage Park was more than just a celebration. It was a turning point, a reminder that even the most divided communities could find common ground. The park stood as a testament to the power of perseverance, collaboration, and hope. As Maya walked home that night, the lanterns glowing behind her, she couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning. Rivertown's story was far from over, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The days following the grand opening of Rivertown Heritage Park felt like the beginning of a new chapter for Maya Carter. The park had transformed not only the town, but also the lives of those who had fought to protect it. The success of the project had reverberated far beyond Rivertown, drawing attention from environmentalists, historians, and activists across the nation. Maya found herself at the center of this growing movement. She had received countless messages from young people inspired by her story, eager to make a difference in their own communities. Determined to channel this momentum, Maya decided to write a manifesto, capturing the lessons she had learned and the values that had driven her fight. Sitting at her desk one late evening, she wrote with urgency and passion. Her manifesto began with a bold statement: "The future belongs to those who fight for it." In the pages that followed, she outlined the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. She shared practical advice on organizing peaceful protests, building alliances, and using social media to amplify one's voice. She also emphasized the value of listening to nature, to history, and to the diverse perspectives within a community. Maya's manifesto was not just a call to action. It was a roadmap for change. She titled it, "Rooted in Justice, a Guide for the Next Generation." When she shared it online, the response was overwhelming. It was downloaded thousands of times within the first week, sparking discussions in classrooms, community centers, and even among policymakers. Maya was invited to speak at schools and conferences, where she encouraged others to take up the mantle of environmental and social justice. Back in Rivertown, the Heritage Park became a hub of activity and learning. School field trips brought students to the park to explore its trails, study its artifacts, and participate in workshops led by Indigenous leaders. The Cultural Center hosted lectures, art exhibits, and community discussions, fostering a deeper appreciation for the land and its history. The park's success also attracted national recognition. Environmental organizations praised its sustainable design, and historical societies commended its dedication to preserving Indigenous heritage. The site became a model for community-led conservation, inspiring similar projects in other towns. One such project was in the neighboring city of Willow Creek, where residents had rallied to save their wetlands from a proposed housing development. Maya visited the site to offer her support, sharing her experiences and strategies. She met with local activists, including a young girl named Elena, who reminded Maya of herself at the beginning of her journey. "You can do this," Maya told Elena, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's not just about saving the land. It's about bringing people together to protect what matters." Months later, Maya found herself back at the Heritage Park for a special ceremony. The event was a culmination of everything she and her community had fought for, a celebration of resilience, redemption, and hope. The crowd gathered near the stone circle, where a new plaque was being unveiled. It bore the inscription, "To those who protect the past and fight for the future, this land stands as a testament to unity and courage." Maya was invited to deliver the keynote speech. As she stood before the audience, her gaze swept over the familiar faces of her family, friends, and allies. She saw Officer Jacob Dawson, who had become a steadfast supporter of the park and a mentor to younger officers. She saw Elder Thomas Greyhawk, whose wisdom had guided the community through its darkest moments. And she saw Elena and her friends, their faces alight with determination. "I want to thank each and every one of you," Maya began, her voice steady and strong. "This journey has shown us that when we come together, when we listen, learn, and lead with our hearts, we can achieve the impossible." She paused, letting her words resonate. "This park isn't just a place, it's a promise to honor our past, protect our present, and build a future where everyone's voice matters." The crowd erupted in applause, and Maya stepped back, her heart full. She knew that this was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a much larger movement. At the close of the ceremony, Maya joined a group of children at the park's new tree planting area. Each child held a young sapling, ready to be planted as part of the park's ongoing restoration efforts. Maya knelt beside a little girl with curly hair and a determined expression. "Do you know why we're planting these trees?" Maya asked. The girl nodded. "So they can grow big and strong like the old ones." "That's right," Maya said, smiling. "And because they remind us that even the smallest actions can make a big difference." As they placed the sapling into the soil, Maya felt a deep sense of hope. She looked around at the children, each one carefully tending to their tree, and knew that the future was in good hands. Back at home, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the obstacles they had faced, the corruption, the fear, the doubt, and how they had overcome them together. She thought about Jacob's transformation, from a man who had wronged her to a mentor who had earned her respect. And she thought about the park, standing as a symbol of what a community could accomplish when it refused to give up. She opened her journal and wrote her final entry for the project. "Today, we planted more than trees. We planted hope, resilience, and the belief that we can create a better world if we work together. This is not the end. It's the beginning of something extraordinary." As the sun set over Rivertown, casting a golden glow over the park, Maya felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that the seeds they had planted, both literal and figurative, would grow into something beautiful. And she was ready to keep fighting, one step at a time. As the sun sets over Rivertown, we're reminded of the power of resilience, unity, and hope. But this is just one story among countless others that need to be told. What do you think about Maya's journey and the transformation of her community? Could you see yourself fighting for something as meaningful? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell us what inspires you to stand up for change. And if you want to join us on more incredible journeys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, let's explore stories that move us, challenge us, and bring us closer to a better future. Stay tuned Our next story will leave you speechless. See you soon. Star.